My name is Randy Rubenstein, and welcome to the Mastermind Parenting Podcast. At Mastermind Parenting, we're on a mission to support strong-willed kids and the families that love them. You're listening to the Mastermind Parenting Podcast with Randy Rubenstein, and welcome to the show. Well, today I have a very exciting collaborative team ready to talk to you about all the things. The Parenting with Impact podcast is hosted by Elaine Taylor-Klaus. Am I saying your last name?
That's correct.
And Diane Dempster, co-creators of ImpactParents.com, an online community, award-winning blog and service organization helping parents all over the world, guiding complex kids to become capable, independent adults. Elaine and Diane are certified coaches with personal experience raising children with challenges such as ADHD, anxiety, and more, and extensive experience in guiding parents to raise their complex kids with confidence and calm. On the podcast, Elaine and Diane interview experts, bringing you cutting-edge information about your child's challenges, teaching you real-life strategies to create lasting change, and demonstrating how coaching can empower you to parent your complex kids one conversation at a time. So welcome to the show. I think we are going to have a really, I know this is going to be fun for me because it sounds like you guys speak my language. So, and hopefully all the listeners are going to love being a fly on the wall of that conversation, because I think we are definitely, my hunch is that we are passionate about the same things. And we just want to help people. We want to support people. We want to support parents in supporting their kids. So their kids, I love what you said, like we want them to grow up to be independent, confident, calm, healthy humans.
Yeah.
And that's what we're all about. So
with their self-esteem intact, right? Like we want them to grow up with a strong self-concept and belief in who they are and what they're capable of.
Yes. Yeah. That's what, to me, that's the definition. It's like, what is this whole thing all about? It's like, this journey is about becoming healthier humans ourselves, because unfortunately, I don't know if I'm speaking for everyone, but I feel like I'm never done.
No.
I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? I'm unlocking the next level of the video game. I thought I was like about to win this thing.
Well, and the thing is that we get so caught up in the day-to-day, it's like we get so caught up in the grades and the chores and the stuff that's going on. We lose track of the fact that this is really about the long game. This is really about helping our kids understand themselves. It's about our own journey and how we're showing up as humans and as parents, and really keeping our eye on that long-term ball can really make a difference.
Yeah. What I've heard myself saying to clients and groups lately is that it's all about being on our journey, which is to support them on their journey and to understand them well enough to enroll them in wanting to take ownership of themselves so that they can live their journey. But we have to accept that this is our journey. And if we have complex kids, that makes our journey a little more complicated, so that it's not about them living what we think they should live. It's about our journey is to kind of support them in figuring out what their journey is. And I think that's hard for a lot of parents to get their head around.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like giving up the fantasy of, it's the delusional fantasy of what we, and it's interesting, whether it's parenting or whatever the child, if you were given the gift of a complex child, whatever like my brother-in-law recently had a fall and has a brain injury. He's recovering from a brain injury, and my brother was saying, "This is so terrible. This is just the worst thing ever." And they don't have children, right? And so he said, "This is the worst thing I've ever been through." And I said, here's the thing. I said, it sucks where you are right now. Just like it sucks when you're in the middle of, okay, my child is not doing what the other kids are doing at the birthday party or, whatever it is.
Preschool or whatever.
Whenever you get the memo that your kid seems like they're the only one doing the wrong thing or the different thing. And it freaking blows when you are in the midst of that and figuring it out before you figured it out. Just like right now, like healing, my brother-in-law. And I said, but if you think about it, there's never been a book or a movie or a story that was like the person was born, their life was perfect, and then they died.
Right.
Like,
It'd be boring.
it'd be so
I
boring.
want
Like,
that.
we all have a hero's journey, and this is part of yours. And I know it's like, at least identifying. It doesn't mean that it's going to make the suckage less sucky when you're in the middle of it, right? But it at least, I think, understanding, oh, that was a delusional fantasy that I was going to have a child. They were going to be born with all the skills and all the gifts, and they were just going to make all the friends and be, they were going to star in that old school ABC after school special. And then you have to remind yourself, like, we all hate Cobra Kai. We're rooting, we're rooting for the bad news bears. Like, why did we forget that? Why did,
Well, and I guess I just want to, you use the word like delusional, and I don't want to make us wrong for it, because it's so human and so normal, and it's what we all do, because we want predictability. We want things to feel familiar. And when something suddenly shocks us out of it, and we've got a kid who doesn't fit in the way we thought that they were going to fit in, then it rocks us, and we've got to do something about that, something with that in our head.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so here's what's coming up as I'm hearing what you're saying, Randy, is that parable or the story I learned about the stallion story in positive intelligence, and there are a million manifestations of who's to say, is it good or bad? Right? It's the worst thing that's ever happened. And, the story is the stallion's leg got broken, or the person's leg got broken, and then he wasn't taken off to war. And then this happened. And then so we have this tendency to judge our circumstances in that moment as good or bad, right or wrong, instead of seeing it as part of the process, the journey, the adventure, the another freaking learning opportunity,
right?
Whatever it is. And it's that assessment of it that's really the problem. Because like life is about taking what comes at us and figuring out how to navigate it.
Yeah. 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 And that's why I say, I think parenting, especially when you're given a strong-willed or a complex child, is the ultimate personal development, self-help journey, right?
And a daily process in learning to let go.
Yeah.
Every day you have to learn to let go.
Well, yeah. And I just said to a mom the other day, I was like, here's the thing. And I think I heard Eckhart Tolle say this one time. If you're parenting either a young child who lives in their emotional brain the majority of the time, and so they're going to test and challenge you, or a child that is one of these complex or strong-willed canaries in the coal mines, right? Like we think they're the problem, but really they're just alerting us that there's problems that are far bigger, and they're just here to alert us. Like, yeah, status quo isn't going to work anymore. We all have to change, and we all have to learn new things. It's interesting because I think that we fight with, like, wait, this is just too hard. This is, I don't wanna, this, and when we can understand that this is just part of the process and no one ever grows, the butterfly never emerges out of the chrysalis unless it experiences struggle.
Yeah.
That's just the bottom line. If you cut that chrysalis open, the butterfly is going to die because it needs to build up its strength by trying to get out. If anybody's ever, I remember buying one of those kits years ago for my kids, and it's like, I saw it in there and the fixer in me just wanted to cut it open. I was like, why can't we just cut that thing open with a knife and let it go? It's like, it wants to get out. It's ready to be free. But if we had, it would have died. You need the struggle to have the strength to take flight.
How different would humankind be if we knew that struggle was part of the process and not something that's supposed to be avoided?
Well, do know, but we don't want it in the future in the present space, right? We can look back to the past, or we can future trip, right? And catastrophize forward what it might be. And I can deal with the past and the present. And I think a lot of us live in the past and the present, and past and the future. And it's the presence of it that's so hard to be with. I mean, the term that came to me, Randy, as you were saying that, was it's effortful. And effortful can be hard, particularly for people, in our world, people, when we look at complex kids and adults, it's often there's something neurological underlying going on. And oftentimes complex kids have complex parents, right? So when we're struggling with executive function issues or delays or those kinds of things, effort is an issue we don't really talk about a lot. But if I have to put the effort into working a little harder, or reading the menu, or making a decision, and that it takes more effort for me to do them for other people, at some point I'm out of spoons. I'm done. I just can't put any more effort in today.
Yeah. Well, and what happens is that we create this story of what life's supposed to be like. I'm not supposed to have to do that. I'm not supposed to have to take that extra step.
Or it's not supposed to be that hard.
Yeah, exactly. And then we end up fighting our reality, and it's the fighting the reality that ends up being the thing that causes us the stress, and not the actual reality itself.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's so true. It's like parenting these kids is harder.
It
is. It is.
It is.
Unequivocally.
It is. I have 2 kids who are not complex or strong-willed, and I have 1 that is. It was a lot harder parenting my 1 that is. And it just, and we all benefited, including his siblings.
Yeah.
Because of that struggle. Like I always say, if I had just an Avery and a Corey and not an Alec, they wouldn't be the Avery and the Corey that they are today. Right. Like, so he has called us all to more. And so, it's just part of each of our stories. And when I think when we make peace with that, it changes how we look at it.
I agree with that 100%. And I want to, if I may, I want to speak to another experience, because you've got 1 complex kid. I've got 3. And a lot of people in our community have multiple complex kids. And there is this other side of the coin, because I couldn't agree with you more. We are all better. Our entire family is better because my eldest was so complex that it called us all forth. And what I hear from parents sometimes, I was just talking to a mom yesterday, a client, is that when there's one kid who's particularly challenging, other kids sometimes don't get the recognition, acknowledgement, attention they need. And so very often when we're working with a parent around one kid, and we finally kind of get that kid going, all of a sudden issues for a next kid that were never identified or never diagnosed or never addressed come to the surface, because that kid's been behaving in a way to make it okay for the rest of the family. So I want to just call that out. I'm not speaking to your dynamic, but when you've got multiple kids, sometimes one kid becomes so complicated that the other kids, it takes a little time to see the whole dynamic. Does that make sense?
Well, I see that all the time as well. Okay. And I think therapists have called this, like, there's the identified patient.
Yes.
Right.
That's a great language for it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then once, and I see that it's like once the kid is the strong-willed one, is out of that defensive place and on a better path.
Yes.
Then all the time I hear that from parents where they're like, what's going on? My easy kid is now being hard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Rick Lavoie said once years ago, the squeaky wheel gets the grease because they're the one that needs the grease.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. And so sometimes it shifts.
It's weird. It's crazy though, how it's like, it fascinates me because the little kids, or the siblings of the most complex kid, right? Or the most strong-willed kid, they don't consciously know what's going on, but it seems like it's like primal, where it's like they know they can't throw something more at you right now. Like it's almost like they're looking at, mom or dad as the pack leader. And it's like, well, I better just figure my shit out because she's got
Right.
bigger fish to fry over there. And then once that seems like that's going well, then they're like, okay, now I can, like now it's finally safe to act like a lunatic myself. And, and it's just like, it's like, what is happening here? Yeah, that's really interesting.
It really is. It's an interesting
Mm-hmm.
dynamic. And I see that it fluctuates a lot. The same mom I was talking to yesterday said, I spent too much time on this one kid. And so I kind of pushed back a little bit, like too much.
Yeah.
And kind of because we have that tendency to then judge ourselves. Well, if I missed that, like we have somebody who works with us, one of the coaches on our team, who is an expert specifically in ADHD and has 5 kids. And one of her kids was not diagnosed till very late teenage years.
Mm-hmm.
And she was beating herself up because she missed it, quote unquote. But the truth is that it wasn't a problem until it was a problem that manifest.
Yeah.
Well, and I kind of see the other side of it too, is that it's this sort of pattern. We're sitting there, we're looking for it, right? It's this sort of, oh my gosh, is that it? Is that it? It's like parents all the time will say, I'm worried about the next kid or the next kid, instead of just letting the kid be where they are. And yeah, they may need help, but let's not worry about, being overexcited about figuring out exactly what's going on until we need to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we only have so much bandwidth.
Yes.
And it's, and it's so interesting. It's like kids are such mirrors and they're such experts on us that I feel like it's like they know, it's like they know when they have, when you're constantly putting out fires with one kid, it's like the other kids know, like it would, it might cause you just to combust. And so they just wait and hold out. Well, I want to kind of segue into, I want to hear more about your stories. Like, so I just learned, Elaine, that you have 3 kids. And Diane, I would love to know, like, what brought you to do this? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and our stories are really similar and different all
I was
at the
going to say,
same
and
time.
not, right?
So I am a theoretically neurotypical adult, and I was blessed with 2 complex kids by birth and a 3rd complex kid, my stepson as well. And when I
Can I pause you? Can I pause you for a second?
Yeah.
Will you just define complex kid?
Yeah, go ahead, Elaine.
I often define it as complex kids are kids who struggle with life, learning, behavior, or some combination of the 3. That they're not hitting expected or typical milestones in one or more of those 3 areas. And the other way I often describe it is if you have a complex kid, you know exactly what we're talking about. And if you don't, you're asking the question.
Okay, got it.
Well, and a lot of the official diagnoses are, ADHD, anxiety, autism,
depression, gifted, twice exceptional.
Yeah, those sorts of things.
Plus learning disabilities.
Anyway, long story short, I'm executive function mom, and everyone else was kind of struggling. And I knew that their brain worked different than me, but I didn't know kind of how to help them. And I found myself frustrated more than I wanted to be. I'm a recovering yelling mom. And when I became a coach as a second career, I started using the tools I was learning, and the whole dynamic in our family changed. And then I met Elaine, and she had a similar story.
But different.
Yeah. But different.
Yeah. So, my background is that I do have 3 complex kids. My eldest was particularly complex. And I was really struggling. I would call myself lost mom or maxed out mom. And I wasn't yelling. There was yelling in the house, but it wasn't me. But I just wasn't coping very well. And on the outside, I looked like I had it all together, like the house and the kids and like it looked great to the outside world. And the inside, I felt like it was a house of cards. And it was, it was it was just always on edge, and things were never going quite as well. And I could never, and I think I was trying so hard to get my eldest kid to fit into the expected norms. And, I came from what I call the achievement elite. We all went to good schools, we're well educated. And this kid, as bright as they were, just wasn't hitting the metrics and wasn't fitting the mold. And a lot of things happened on our journey that changed that. A nutritional change that was dramatic, a number of diagnoses that led to that. But somewhere in that process, two things happened. One is I was heading back to graduate school to get a PhD because I really wanted to work with other parents and support parents who were as lost as I was. And I couldn't find a program that met my schedule with 3 small kids. Mm-hmm. And so somebody suggested, why don't you go to coaching school and start with that and then see where it goes. So I was doing coaching as a stopgap measure. But in order to do all of that, because I thought I was going to graduate school and I knew I needed to take the GREs, I had myself evaluated. By that point, I had 3 kids who had been diagnosed like dominoes. And it's like, my husband can't be responsible for all of this neurology. Mm-hmm. So I had myself evaluated. And at 40-something years old, I was diagnosed realized I had been undiagnosed with both learning and attention issues. Mm-hmm. And it was pretty profound. I mean, my whole life started to make sense. I began to see why I had made decisions I had made, how I had accommodated for myself. And so when I got to coaching that first afternoon, I called my husband in tears, like, oh my God, I found it. This is it. And I knew I had found this way of being in the world that was in alignment with who I am. And there was a skill set and tools and concepts. There was a framework I could learn to apply this. And so I dove in head first. And, I'd been coaching for a couple of years by the time I met Diane. And when we met each other, what we discovered was that we both had this experience of when we became coaches, we became significantly better parents. And it wasn't rocket science. We could teach it. But we also had, there were 2 other things. One, we both came from a national framework. So she had worked for Kaiser, I had worked for Planned Parenthood Federation of America. So both of us had a national healthcare perspective on the world. And we discovered that it worked for her and it worked for me, and she was neurotypical and I wasn't. Mm. And that was really important. We knew that this could really reach a broader audience of parents, because it wasn't just something that was effective for the get it done moms. It worked for the lost moms like me too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's so interesting. Y'all are so lucky to have found each other.
Oh my gosh, so lucky. We have unbelievably complementary skills. And we were really lucky. We knew we were going to do a workshop.
We were going to start by just doing a workshop or a webinar here. We both live out in Atlanta, in the Atlanta metro area, and we were just going to do a workshop. And then I think both of us, because we come from a public health background, went, wait a second, there's a gap here, right? And when we first started this, there was a lot of support out there for kids who were struggling. Our business was started as Impact ADHD, and we've since then expanded to be Impact Parents. But there was so much energy focused on helping the kids, but nothing, very little supporting the parents, particularly beyond basic education of here's what's going on with your kid. Mm-hmm. And so we said, let's fill that gap. We both needed that support when we were parenting in different ways, but in similar ways. And that's really how we got started with Impact Parents.
And we knew the coaching helped. So but within the first year, we were like, we had an award as an innovative program and all this stuff. And like, we didn't set out to do it. It just kind of unfolded to meet the need.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I think it's so interesting because like I have a lot of parents in my community, in my mastermind community, are medical healthcare professionals.
Yeah, so do we.
We do too.
Right? So like pediatricians, nurse practitioners,
therapists.
Yes, therapists.
Yep.
Social workers.
Yep.
It's like what we were all looking for and couldn't find and then went and created.
Yeah.
Wow. They know that, because you're a medical professional And when you have a child that's, you're scratching your head thinking something's going on here.
Mhm.
And they tell me, they're like, I went to all my colleagues. No one was able to help me. Right. So they know there's a gap in our system that I think that you guys and me are fulfilling.
Agreed. Well, and the gap is not just in, I mean, because as professionals, they may be able to identify what's going on, but that doesn't mean they know what to do about it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what I think coaching offers, which is why what all of us have been doing has been so successful these years, is that we're not handing the parents a solution and saying, here, do this. We're bringing them through the process of learning how to figure it out.
Yep.
And so it's a process-oriented approach to problem solving instead of a solution-oriented approach. And all the research out there is on solutions. Here, let's give the parents a reward chart. That'll fix it, right? But if the parent doesn't understand what the purpose is, what they're trying to achieve, how to get a kid to work with them and how to collaborate with a kid to create a reward system that works, then it's as effective as a piece of paper.
Well, and part of it is a challenge we have in our medical model.
Yeah.
Is that, it's like, I've got a problem, I'm going to fix it. I got a problem, I got to fix it. And how many parents come to us and they're like, I got to fix this thing that's going on with my kids. And we know that these kids are just, they're kids. And this is how their brain is working, and helping to honor that and to nurture that and identify their strengths and to support them instead of trying to fix it changes the vibe and the work that we're doing as parents, and turns it upside down, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk. I think that coaching, right? Like you guys said something to me before we started recording, and I always say to all of the parents that I work with, I'm like, my ultimate job is to coach myself out of a job.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think as parents, that is our job too, is to coach ourselves out of a job, because before you know it, when you show up in that above the line coaching place and that role, right? Above the line of consciousness, I think, that term is becoming more mainstream. Above the line, below the line. When we're below the line, that's when we come up, that's when we're the authoritarian punishment. Like, how can I bribe the people? What kind of a reward? What is the consequence? Meaning, what really is the punishment? How do I control all the people and fix the issues? And that below the line place is never going to support your kids in becoming their own coaches ultimately, right?
We want them to become effective problem solvers in life.
Yeah.
And if we're constantly telling them what to do, we're never giving them the opportunity to learn how to navigate themselves and their brains, whatever that is, whether that's because there's a neurological issue or because they're strong-willed and an Enneagram 8, or because, whatever it is that defines who they are and what they're bringing to the world. The process of navigating self is what it's all about. You started off earlier saying, I'm still a work in progress. Damn it, I'm still a work in progress. And that's the piece that I think it's not a destination. There's no there. And so when we can be in relationship with our kids consciously, and with ourselves as parents in relationship to our kids, when we can think in terms of collaboration, we often talk about it. We call it the coach approach, right? And we talk about it in terms of, we don't want you to become your kid's coach, because we want you to be their parent.
Yeah.
But we want you to be able to take a coach-like approach as a parent, because a coach-like approach is empowering, and it fosters independence, and it inspires people to overcome obstacles, and it inspires a sense of agency. And so the opportunity that I think we have as parents, and that's the beauty of the work all three of us get to do in the world, is to invite and enroll parents to see their capacity in fostering the agency of these amazing young people. And that's a huge gift.
And I think when you're in overwhelm, operating from an outdated
paradigm
model.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like the way we were all conditioned was not this, conscious growth mindset. Let's, coach approach. I love that term. Like that is not what's going to come online when we have a kid that's behaving in a way where they seem like they're out of their mind.
Mhm.
Or, when you're in public and all the other parents are looking at you
Or
because
you think they are.
right. Well, I think a lot of times they are, because I think that
Yeah.
there is a lot of judgment when you have a kid that's exploding at Target because, they just because why can't I have it? And it's, like that feels mortifying. And or when you get the call from school where your kid was under the desk growling at their teacher, right?
Right.
Because they have undiagnosed dysgraphia,
Right.
right? And this little first grader during journal time, all of a sudden,
It's a great
right?
example.
I mean, and you get the call from the principal that your kid was acting like a caged animal and threatening to bite their teacher. Like, that is mortifying.
Yeah.
Right. And so, when parents come to you or when they come to me and they're dealing with that, I mean, we're talking about somebody who is in overwhelm.
Yeah.
And and so that's where I feel like the coaching process, and when you have never received coaching in your life, you don't realize how supportive and wonderful it, to get that kind of support when you're in that state and you don't know who to turn to and you feel like you're being judged all over the place, to have people that are going to show up and help you through that process, right? Like there's so much I feel that is, it's like, it's nurturing. One of my moms who is like a Texas gal, and she lives out, in the outskirts of Houston, and she's got lots of animals, and she's like, Randy Rubenstein, I just love how sometimes you give me a spanking, but it feels like a hug. And it's like,
That's it.
And I'm like, because it has to be nurturing and also skill building, right?
So I had this beautiful opportunity last year to learn from a guy named Jim Selman, who's one of the OGs of coaching. He's like brought coaching to the workplace in the 80s. And what he was talking about, I love what you're speaking to, because what he was talking about is the value of a coach is that classic coach holds up the mirror, but the coach helps you see perspectives that you couldn't otherwise see for yourself. A coach will help you see something you can't see because of the perspective you're in, and to offer different lenses or perspectives for you to see yourself and to see the possibility for yourself that you may not be able to see by yourself.
Well,
That's right.
Well, and going back to what you were saying, Randy, about overwhelm, when we're in a place of overwhelm, we've only got that one,
Right.
like
We're
narrow,
shut down.
the blinders go on and we're like, this is all we can see. This is terrible. I've got to fix this. I'm being judged. And so sometimes having an outsider who can come in and say, yeah, that's what's going on right now, and it can be better, or yeah, you can do something about it.
Or create the space for you to even pause long enough to process that, right? When we're walking around as parents in constant trigger state, constantly amygdala hijacked, right? We're not in a place where we're using the more creative, complex parts of our brains. We're locked in flight or freeze a lot.
Yeah.
And so whether it's overwhelm or frustration or anger or resentment, it prevents us actually from using our whole brain to respond to what's going on, and leads us to only react, because all the brain can do when you're coming from that triggered space, I always point to the back of my head because that's, the amygdala hijack. All you can do is react from there. And so inviting the possibility of learning how to slow things down enough to respond it's exciting, but it's also scary, because the notion of slowing things down feels hard for parents, because I got to keep going. I got to get through it. I got to handle it. She's screaming in the aisles, right?
You got to stop it.
Well, and I think that's why, like, I didn't really understand, you know, how sometimes it's just like you do things because intuitively you're just, you know, I'm a rebel tendency. So it would never have worked for me to just learn a traditional approach and have no space to have my own positive spin or to have my own spin on it. Right.
Totally.
Right.
And so something that I've done for a long time is I teach, you know, in my coaching process, and it's hard to teach because I've had lots of people over the years ask if I would train them as a mastermind parenting coach. And there was an occupational therapist who I love, who's very aligned with me, and she worked with me as a coach for a while. It's very hard to teach my process in the way that I do it. Like, I'm like, well, you have to do it your way. Like, I think we're all meant to do it to bring our own spin, because my way is there's a lot of showmanship in the way I coach people. I'm an Enneagram 7.
Okay.
And I'm like, wait, do we have to grow up at some point? You know, like, I have a little bit of that. I never want to grow up. And so I teach through story and I coach involving story. And there's something that happens that now I can kind of identify it. When I share a story that in some way is in some way I think it's like my brain doesn't even process it. It's like my body is called to share some story. And what I'm really doing is this parent who just went through this mortifying experience, who is having that amygdala hijack, right? When I share a story and all of a sudden we might be laughing a little bit, and they're like, oh, what I think that does is it helps someone to get out of their own blind spot. And then they can connect the dots where they're not the only one who's dealt with something, even if the story isn't the exact same thing. It might be a story about me and my husband, or me from, you know, and a friend, whatever it is. But there's something about the power of story that I think helps people to all of a sudden feel like, oh, I'm not the only one who deals with these things. And that's just empathy. And now all of a sudden you have the person moving up in their brain and they're going into that problem solving place.
Yeah. No, I think it's,
you know?
it's huge what you're speaking to. And the other thing that comes to me about it is that, you know, as parents, very often we get caught in, here's the lesson I want you to learn.
Yeah.
Right. But when you tell a story, then you allow someone to take the lesson that they have to learn from it. And it may not be at all the lesson you thought you wanted them to get. And you got to let go of that. And when training coaches, it's the same. And we have been, I think, really successful over the years in training other people to teach this curriculum and to coach our community with us. But at first we met with a lot of resistance. Some of the early people didn't stay along because they wanted to do it exactly how we did it. And our whole thing was, no, you have to make this yours. Because if you don't make it yours, it won't have that authenticity.
I so agree with, I feel like that's the thing I think the mainstream public doesn't fully understand about coaching. Like, coaching is a creative career, right?
It's an art
like
form.
You can, right. It is an art form because you learn a curriculum and you have to bring your own flavor and your own sense of playfulness to that curriculum. Right. And so it's like, if you were to just learn, this is the framework, this is exactly how we do things, and there was no individuality in it, I just don't think that would be effective coaching. I think it has to, like, the person has to be trained as a coach in a way that that allows them to tap into their own unique special flavor of coaching. Right. So every coach, there's not going to be any coach that is the exact same and is for, you know, I've had lots of people over the years, like, just teach me how to do it. And I'm like, but here's the thing. The people that I'm meant to help are different. Like there's plenty of people who are not going to be my people. They like, I might annoy them. I say, too much. My stories go on and on. They're like, get to the freaking point already. Are you kidding me? And those are the people for you, right?
Well, and Randy, let's take it back to what we were saying earlier about parenting, right? It's just sort of, there's not a right way to do this. You've got to figure out your own way of doing this, your own flavor of doing this, and partnering with a coach to figure out, how do I take the approach and some of the strategies and ideas and put it into who I am, into my own family dynamic, into my own goal is how I want to show up as a human, and my kids' goal of how do they want to be as humans, and how I want, it's like, how do I want to raise these beautiful humans? And so we make it our own instead of saying, okay, if this happens, this is what you do. And I think that that's what's beautiful about what we're all teaching is make this your own and figure this out. Elaine, what are you going to add?
Well, what you're speaking to, really, it's about the being, not the doing.
Yeah.
It's who do we want to be as a parent? Who do we want to invite our kids to be as they learn themselves, instead of so much focus on, well, did you do this? Did you do this? Are you doing this? Like at some point you can do everything all day long, but if you're not being with it, it just feels robotic. That's why, we've had this conversation in a mastermind that I'm part of. I really am not worried about AI and coaching, because
me neither.
Artificial intelligence is never going to replace the presence that any of the three of us can bring when a client comes and needs a space to process and have a conversation with themselves about figuring out how they want to be with something, and then what they want to do with that. That's our job.
Well, and I feel like, it's exactly right. And I feel like, it's just like, would you ever sign your kid up for a gymnastics class without a coach in charge, or a soccer team without a coach? Like this whole idea, like my real goal is that every single parent is going to know that this is I think every single parent feels like raising their kids is their most important job. It's like the ultimate equalizer. I have, stay-at-home moms, and I have high-level executives. It doesn't matter.
You're right.
Right? We're all speaking the same language, and we all just want our kids. We don't want to screw up our most important job, which is raising healthy humans. And so we all want to get that right. And I feel like you would never, ever think that if your kid came to you and said, I want to be an amazing, like my 7-year-old niece, she's like doing gymnastics all the time when she comes over. She's like, I am going to the Olympics. If your 7-year-old is like, I want to go to the Olympics, you're going to sign them up for lessons with a coach. Anything. I mean, you're going to be like, absolutely. We will sign you up, and you can go to practice, and you can practice your skills, and we're going to get you really amazing coaching. Why on earth, as parents, would we think that we should come to this brand new thing when we have kids and think we're just going to nail it?
Right. Without, like, we're going to stick the landing.
Yes. Well, and we think that we should have to. I mean, there's so much shame around not doing it right, or that, I'm supposed to know how to be
asking for help at all.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
I think it's also, it's like, as I was just talking with a mom recently, she was talking about, she's planning her son's bar mitzvah, and she all of a sudden it's coming up, and she's like all of a sudden panicking about all these like minor details.
Right.
And we were talking about it, and I was like, okay, this is normal. And I think you have to also understand this is societal. Like as women, it's like, you should just know how to be an amazing mother and raise, like you should know how to do all the things. You should also know how to, throw a proper dinner party and a party and be an amazing host. And so I think that's why so many of us are like, I don't want to have anyone over. I don't know how to do, I'm not even sure exactly what freaking fork I'm supposed to use. And I'm always looking around, like no matter how much, I learned that I don't remember all of the right ways to do things. And so I think we put pressure on ourselves, but also it's societal pressure that, your value is connected in how you host other people.
Performance is the word that's coming up
Yes.
to me, right?
Yes.
As women, we are judged by our performance, by our kids' performance, and if they're doing well, that's a reflection
That's
on
right.
us, and if they're not, that's a reflection on us. And we have a hard time separating that they are separate individual human being. They're not actually a reflection or an extension of us, but the world wants it to be that way. Yeah, you were
That's
making
right.
me think about that old commercial. Remember, I can bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan,
Yeah,
right?
fry in a pan.
It's like,
Yeah,
just
exactly.
that is the
Angela.
paradigm, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
a perfume commercial, wasn't it?
Yes. Yes. Ridiculous. And then all of a sudden you're given this kid that won't just do the freaking thing to make you look good and feel like you're nailing it. And it's super triggering. And then you find yourself as, Diane, you're not a yeller. I'm sure you weren't screaming your head off like a lunatic at your friends. You were probably like the supportive, lovely person. And then, right? And then we find ourselves being that person. We're like, who am I? How did this happen?
Yeah.
How did I get here?
Yeah. And how do I get out of this place? Because this is
doesn't
not,
feel like me.
Yeah, it doesn't. And I think that's it. It's that, we've kind of touched around, but let's call it, there's an authenticity that gets lost when we step into the role of partner or parent or whatever it is, that we forget to bring our whole selves into it.
Well, I 100% agree with that. And it's interesting. Like that's been part of, I haven't known exactly how to pinpoint it, but I'm like, here's this parenting thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's the ultimate equalizer. And even people who don't have kids, they were a kid. Like everyone is affected by parenting.
Had that experience. Yeah.
And yet we think we need to talk about it all in a very clinical, buttoned up way. And not to just be regular people. We don't bring that authenticity. Like all of a sudden when we're talking about the children and the parenting, we need to use our fanciest words. And it's like, what the fuck? We are all just regular people. Like we have to bring our real selves, and our kids are like these amazing little wizards, and they call us out on our bullshit all the time, right? Where they're like, parents tell me this, like when they start to learn the new tools and they want to say things exactly like me.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, so at first that's fine. And then you're going to infuse your own language into this. But if this is how you need to practice it like that. But when you start using your own spin, that's when we know you're mastering it.
Exactly.
And the kids will look at them and they're like, what are you saying? What does that even mean? I'm like, your kids don't speak my shtick. They speak your shtick. So please start using your own language because they're on to you. Right?
So many things are coming up with what you're saying. One is we had a therapist once that we were working with as a couple decades ago who said to us, parenting is damage control. It's not whether you're going to screw them up. You are. It's just how quickly you recognize that and you can kind of rectify it and minimize the damage. And that was from a, leading psychiatrist, thought leader guy. So there's that. That's one thing that came up.
My whole thing is absolutely. The thing is, we don't have to wait for our kids to become adults and then come back and say, I've been holding this in for however many years, right? For 35 years. I'm like, you want to know, like my kids, especially my daughter, who's now 21, she loves to tell me, she's like, remember when you sent me to that camp and I didn't want to go? I'm like, well, that was a terrible idea. She's like, yeah, it was. It was like a month of hell. I'm like, yeah, that was a bad choice. She's like, yeah, it was. I'm like, okay, that's done.
Yeah. My next book, I probably won't write it, but I joke. My next book is going to be, my kids are all in their 20s. They're all in therapy and it's all my fault. Yeah. And my eldest child said to me recently, Mom, I'm pushing 30. You better write that book.
I always say, I think the goal is for your kids to become young adults and to know they are worthy
Yes.
of going to therapy
And doing the work for
Because-
themselves, right?
because
Yeah.
everybody's going to have stuff.
Yeah.
It's just part of the human experience. Again, back to the hero's journey. We all have our own hero's journey. There was never a life. There's never going to be a story that was interesting if it was just like it was perfect.
But I will tell you, about 4 years ago, so my husband's also a coach. So we've both been on this journey. And my eldest was about 12, I think, ish when we started. And so about 3 or 4 years ago, all 3 of our kids came to us one summer, different places. They were living in different places. And they all came to us and said, thanks for becoming a coach. And it was the most gratifying summer of love, right? It was a moment in time. I'm sure they've all forgotten it, but each in their different experiences of life were able to see in their dynamics with their peers what they had learned and the emotional intelligence that they had gained from being raised in an environment where parents weren't just directing them around, but their parents were actually enrolling them in the process. And if they decided not to go to the 8th grade dance, they were going to know why they didn't go to the 8th grade dance, you know? And so I do think that there's something about this work that is about elevating the next generation. That's about enrolling the next generation in a different way of being with their consciousness about life and living. And this next generation coming up is going to turn us all on our heads in a lot of ways. And this framework that we're all bringing to the world is part of that, for sure.
That is so beautiful and speaks to me on so many levels. And I really think it's like, it is what we're supposed to be doing. It's called evolution. Like, God willing, our kids are going to do it better than we did. And so on and so on and so on. Like, that's what we're supposed to do. Yeah. This is so good. Okay. So the last topic that I would love to briefly touch on, you guys have been so generous with your time, before we wrap up, is tell me about complex kids who are and families who are supporting complex kids who are now going through the process of, I don't even know the proper PC way to refer to it, but they're changing their pronouns.
So gender issues, and sexuality issues. So we call them queer and quirky kids. For those of you listening, queer has been a term that in our generation growing up was a deeply maligned term, and this generation has reclaimed it as a term of empowerment. They really like it. So hear me when I say I'm not slurring anyone when I use the word queer. This is a request from this generation. And from this community. My kids were just telling me last night, it's LGBTQIA++. Now they're saying it's LGBTQ. So I'm like, please. So whatever, I don't know what they call it. But I think what we're seeing a lot in the world that we're in now is more and more kids. It's very common for kids in the complex world to be more likely to also be dealing with underlying gender issues. And it's complicated. And there's a huge backlash. They just passed a terrible law in the state of Georgia. It was just signed yesterday. There's some terrible laws in Tennessee. So there's a big backlash against it. But there is definitely a higher incidence of gender-related differences in the population of kids with neurological differences. And that's not to say that it's causal. It's just there is a higher relevance or correlation. What would you add, Diane? Or is there anything specific? I don't know what.
No, I wasn't sure, Randy, what you were looking for. I mean, I think that it's a lot of times parents will see these kids as complex kids. And I think that that's really what we want underneath it is for parents to say, wow, this is a kid who's struggling, or this is a kid who's trying to figure themselves out. How do I support this kid, regardless of what the thing is that's going on for them? Is this sort of, how do we support them?
Well, and so here's another thing I want to share. So I have 3 kids who are all what I would call gender nonconforming, all queer and quirky. Not necessarily queer doesn't mean gay, right? But my eldest is trans non-binary, and they didn't come out till their 20s. But in hindsight, we can look back their whole life and see it. But, 20 years ago, we didn't even know what I had to look up the term to know what it was, 5, 7 years ago, whenever it was when they came out. And so for a lot of our kids, there's kind of layers of things that have shifted in the last 10, 15 years. So part of it is there's an awareness of these issues that we didn't really know existed. So when you had a kid who, we used to call them tomboys, right? Or a boy who might have been more effeminate. We're now understanding that there's an underlying feeling of gender difference that those kids have that I think 20 years ago, we didn't know to give them space for it. So I would have said my kid was a tomboy, that they might turn out to be gay. They wore lots of baggy, oversized clothes. They didn't want to wear girls' clothes. And they were so ADD off the charts that it was I just kind of figured they needed to move, and they connected with the other boys because it wasn't as hard socially as a dynamic as it was to try to stand still on a playground listening to the girls talk about stuff. They just couldn't be with that. So some of it is related to other proclivities. But I do think that when we pay attention now with a new lens, we can see our kids will tell us what's going on with them if we listen. And if we listen without judging it or correcting it or redirecting it. And I cannot say that I'm proud of every conversation I had and of every way that I responded when our kid came to us with different issues over the years. I made a lot of mistakes in how I responded. And I can say, forgive me, I didn't know. And that doesn't, and what my kid has said to me is, just because you did your best doesn't mean it didn't have an impact on me. And we've now been able to have some of those very difficult conversations, with them as an adult. But I guess the message I want to share with people is slow down and listen. Your kids will tell you what they need to tell you if you are open to hearing what they want to tell you. And if they feel safe enough to tell you what's going on with them.
Well, and if they're not, then that's the opportunity and the indication that you have to go back and build that trust and build that relationship. And that's such an important foundation to this, is how do I create an environment where my kid can tell me what's going on with them?
Yeah. Even if they don't know, you don't have to have an answer, but I'm feeling this, or I'm struggling with that. Or, as I say, I look back in hindsight and it's like, how did I miss it? But I didn't know it existed. I mean, another thing, in our complex world, the diagnostic manual changed in 2013. So there are all these kids that we're seeing now who are finally being diagnosed with autism, who we didn't know it existed, because before 2013, a provider had to make a choice between ADHD and autism, and they were not allowed to diagnose both. So there were all these kids that were diagnosed with ADHD, where the autism was missed because a choice had to be made. And that's no longer the case. So this stuff is all evolving. And as we understand more, it's almost like we have to give ourselves permission to forgive ourselves for what we've done in the past, to be present to where it is now, and to listen and be open to do it differently moving forward. Because we can woulda, coulda, shoulda all day long. And I could ask myself, how did I miss that, with a judgment? Or I can ask myself, how did I miss that? And what's there to learn from that moving forward, without judgment of self?
I just love what you just said. I just feel like complex kids, but it's also complex parenting.
Yes. Gosh.
Right?
Yeah.
And when you're dealing with it just sucks when you feel like, who do I even turn to help me with this? Like, not only am I dealing with a very complex situation, I don't even know who I can go to for support. And so I love what you just shared, because I feel like anyone listening who starts to sense that that those issues might be happening in their family, just to know that, like, there are people like you guys out there who have literally walked through this experience. Like, you are that big sister person
Mm.
who also has the coaching skills that they can turn to for a resource. And I mean, doesn't it feel amazing to know that like you can provide that to people, maybe something that you couldn't find for yourself, and now you get to pay it forward?
Every day, every single day, at some point, I will say to Diane or my husband or somebody, it's like, I love what I get to do in the world. I cannot believe how privileged and grateful I am that we found each other, Diane and I, and that we've been able to create what we've created in the world. It blows me away, truly.
It's just so beautiful. And it also makes me believe in humanity because in this
Yeah.
dog eat dog world, like for those of us who have created the thing that we couldn't, the support thing that we couldn't find
Yeah.
in our own lives. Like my husband looked at me, you know, many years ago, and when I was starting this business, and who was I to start a business?
Right.
I didn't know any of the
I
things.
hear you.
And I was working all the time. And he's like, what's your goal here? Like, are you trying to make a bunch of money? Like what exactly is? And I was like, we figured something out. It is selfish not to share it.
Right.
Right. Like you forget because we're now where we are, but you forget what it was like to be the parent of a 7-year-old Alec.
Yeah.
You forget what it was like when we were all going out to dinner and then he was like, I hate that place. I'm not going. I won't eat. I'm not getting out of the car. Like you forget now because you know, it's like birth amnesia.
Yeah.
And so I was like, there's something in me that feels like I have to share this thing. I don't even know exactly what this thing is, but I'm going to figure it out. And it sounds like you guys feel the same.
Yeah. I like to say motherhood is the necessity of invention. And, you know, like all of us, when you have the kind of motherhood experience we had to come up with a way to be with it that worked. And I'm 1,000% with you. Like to not share it is like, that's not what it's about. It's not why we're here. Right. We got to pay it
That's
forward.
Yeah.
In beautiful ways. I mean, when Diane and I started, one of the things we were really committed to was we knew this coaching thing worked. We knew it was effective. So we wanted to bring it out in a way that was as affordable and accessible as possible. We never wanted anybody we didn't want money to ever stand in the way of somebody learning the coach approach if they wanted to. So a huge amount of what we do is free. We have blogs and podcasts and, you know, webinars and all this stuff we do for free because we want people to be able to get to it at whatever level. And of course, we want them to invest in themselves and to step into programs and training and coaching because we know that takes it to the next level. But wherever people are, this work that you do, that we do, it's open, it's accessible, and it changes lives, really.
Yeah, I mean, we're so aligned. That's exactly the reason I started the podcast too, against all my advisors 4.5 years ago. And I said, this coaching thing that has changed my life and changed the trajectory of my children's lives.
Yeah.
It is not just for people who can afford to pay.
Exactly.
Like if I can, you know, if I can share, you know, even little bits and pieces with people and they are going to listen to the podcast and they're going to integrate the things they learn about into their life. Beautiful. Right? Beautiful. Yeah. Okay. So how do people get in touch with you and any final words that you want to share with the listeners?
Well, so there's a free tip sheet that I think is going to end up in the show notes. So definitely check that out. It's one of our favorite tip sheets about supporting complex kids.
It's called, if you go to impactparents.com/mastermind parenting, we've got a free gift for you.
Wonderful.
And that's 12 key coaching tips for parents of complex kids. And as you know, like we've just said and what you've said, there are a lot of resources. Our podcast, Parenting with Impact, our website, again, impactparents.com. And then if you do Mastermind Parenting, I think what's most important is I want to invite parents who are listening to ask for the help you need, wherever that is, right? I mean, Randy, what you do is gorgeous and delicious, and I've really enjoyed getting to know you and look forward to collaborating more. And
Same.
you know, every parent out there are people out there who can support you if you give yourself permission to ask for the help you want and need. And that's huge.
Well, and part of that is not judging yourself for the way you've been showing up until now, or not getting it perfect, or not knowing the answers. I mean, I think that's, we were talking about that earlier. It's like, we're so wired to think we're supposed to be able to get this, and we don't, and that's okay. And there are lots of ways to approach this parenting thing, and getting help is a great way to move yourself to a new place if you're feeling like you're stuck.
One step at a time.
Yeah. Being human is messy business, and we're all just doing the best we can to figure it out. And we're all on our own hero's journey. So this was such a great conversation. I've loved getting to connect with the two of you, and I hope to keep in touch too. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for listening today, guys. I hope you picked up some tips, tools, maybe some baby steps for creating more balance and boundaries in your life. And I just wanted to let you know, if you want to continue moving the needle forward in creating this for yourself, having a happier household, I want you to go to my website and check out mastermindparenting.com. We have 3 beginning programs, and if you need some accountability and more support, then please look for the one that would be a good fit for you. And as always, we're on all the social channels under Mastermind Parenting. On Instagram, it's mastermind_parenting. And, you know, periodically I do pop up on different Instagram lives, Facebook lives, where I give you teaching and coaching, and I love engaging with you live to help you help your strong-willed kids so that they can feel better, because when they feel better, they do better. And I love, love, love getting to know you guys. So thanks for listening. If you like this podcast, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Super, super appreciative.